My first one, let's see if it's a doozy or not. They say nothing breeds complacency like success. If a third unity government gets in with a new Mr. Premier of Mr. McTaggart, how do you feel a third successive unity government can make sure that we can handle governance issues, education reform, infrastructure for a growing population, financial prudence? How do you feel a third successive government can make sure that Cayman stays strong in those type of environments?
Well, to start with, no government is ever, in my experience, ever made up of precisely the same people in the same roles, right? So I fully expect that, when Roy takes over, there is going to be a change in leadership style. He's going to stamp his own mark on how he handles, the range of issues that you have to, as Premier, from caucus to cabinet to policy decision making. But the key, and I think this is what we've had our ups and downs. We've had some major challenges. We have had great popularity at times, and we've had less than that, on issues like the cruise port and so forth. So, when you're in government for long enough, sometimes you're hero and sometimes you're villain. As I joked about today with some of my colleagues, the love doesn't last forever. It depends on what the issue or issues are. But the key to success of any government is to start with a plan. One of the great challenges, that the lesson I learned very early and in the most painful way, I started to learn it the day after I was elected for the first time in November of 2000. That when you start with a group of people who have nothing in common save the desire to be in government, who have not worked together to develop any sort of coherent plan or set of programs, what you wind up with is not only the battles to form the government and the horse trading, which is inevitable, but you also wind up with a government which is schizophrenic and dysfunctional, because there is no common thread that runs through their vision for where they're trying to take the country and how they're planning to address education, financial services, healthcare, the full range of subjects that we have to deal with. So you do need, and that's I think been the basis for the success, is that when we won the government in 2013 with a bare majority, we had 10. So that was a true progressives-led administration. It wasn't a coalition government in the sense this one is, because we had 10 of the seats, a bare majority, and then other people joined us. We had in writing, in black and white, what our vision was. And while you had to make some modifications to it to accommodate the views of other people that you want to have buy-in, the basis of the plan for the 4 years was there. Similarly, and was even more important this time around, in 2017, we only had 7 of the seats, and therefore we took on another 3 and 2, 5, 6. 5. I've forgotten now. Anyhow, but we did have to get to at least 11 to have a viable government, and the independents, quite frankly, didn't have a national plan, and you wouldn't expect them to, because they're running on an individual platform in a constituency. So we had to make some adjustments to the plan that we had to take into account their views, which we've done, but the basis of the plan was there. And that allows a government to have coherence and to be able to move forward very swiftly. If after the elections, the first thing you have to do is to sit down and develop a 4-year plan, I'm afraid that is going to be met with the kind of disaster that the government, the group that were elected in 2000 were met with, of which I was a member. because you wind up with then everybody going through an exercise which should have been gone through much in advance of that. And issues don't stop, and the country has to be run. The minute that you are sworn in, even before that, there are high expectations for what you're going to do. If you start without a plan, it is going to be next to impossible. And so, as I said, I think the key is that we've had a plan, and in 2013, in 2017, and we have a plan that is well advanced in terms of its development now for the upcoming elections. And that, I think, is what allows us to be able to speak with confidence about our vision for the country and about the return to prosperity.
Thank you for that, Mr. Premier. One of the points you picked up on in your address was the flow of the vaccines coming from the UK, the war that is going on between the EU and the UK over the availability and flow of that vaccine. Do you feel confident that we will get the necessary volume of vaccine to get ideally to our 70 to 75% vaccine level in a reasonable period of time?
In short, yes, but let me qualify that a little. This is a highly charged political issue, not just in the EU, but in the UK, which has just passed, the tragic milestone of more than 100,000 deaths. And so there is noise around the fact that the UK is sending this treasured and limited quantity of vaccines to the overseas territories. But the UK government, from the Prime Minister right down, has said, and he said it publicly again, is that the UK government has to treat its overseas territories fairly and to ensure that they have a proportionate number of the vaccines available to their people who are British citizens. And so they're holding the line there. But of course that has now been further complicated by the fact that the EU, who signed the contract 3 months later than the UK did, because there are glitches in the manufacture of the vaccine in Belgium, are insisting that those which were destined for the UK should remain in the EU. So this is a massive row, but I was briefed as recently as today by His Excellency that the UK is absolutely standing firm on this. We ordered these, we paid for them, and we want them delivered. We are not conceding that they should be given to the EU because of issues which have arisen with the manufacturer in Belgium. So what we have, the second, what time is it now? The B, I think, should have arrived by now, but that'll have about 11,500, because although they say it's 9,750, each one of the whatever they call these things, they come in 5 vials. They actually have more, and so we're getting about 11,500 vaccines. Today, we're due another about the same on the 11th of February, and then another batch at the end of February. I think we can remain fairly confident up to that point, but this thing is constantly changing. So I think for us right now, the greatest challenge is persuading older people, vulnerable people, to go and get the vaccine. I mean, I have it, I carry it with me everywhere I go. I have a graph, it's now some weeks old, but that brought home to me in the starkest way that of all the factors that affect mortality with respect to COVID-19, the single greatest one is age. If you are 80 years old or older and you get COVID-19, if you haven't signed your will, do so. Because 95% of people over the age of 80 who get it in the UK die. So we really want to get vaccinated persons over the age of 60, but particularly those over 80. The ESO has told us that there are about 2,250 people over 80 in our population, and over 60, just under 10,000. So those are achievable numbers with the volumes we have of the vaccine. Even what we have now, if we can just get people to take it. And any reopening plan is absolutely contingent upon getting at least 90% of your vulnerable population vaccinated. I mean, some younger people will die. I mean, we see that across the world. But frankly, if you are in your 20s and 30s, even your 40s, it's unlikely to kill you. But if you are in that older group, the chances of surviving get less and less the older you are. So that's why we are absolutely pushing to try to get the most vulnerable vaccinated, because these are our mothers, fathers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, fathers. This is a small community. If you don't know everybody, you almost know of everybody who's here. And there's not the anonymity which is the case in so many other countries. You know, that's what, from the very beginning, I was just overwhelmed, quite frankly, at the prospect that people would die if we made the wrong decisions or didn't make the decisions that we should make. And these were not going to be people that, it's just somebody died. You know, after 20 years in as a representative, delivering the number of obituaries and tributes that I and anybody who's been around this business has done, you know, you understand in a way that you can't if you don't have that experience, that how important each person is to their family. And I and my colleagues were going to have to look in the eyes of bereaved family members at Foster's, at a gas station, at a bar, at a restaurant, in the office, and feel the responsibility for their loss because we made the wrong decisions. So the first 4 weeks of this, I couldn't sleep at all because we didn't know what we didn't know, because we didn't have the ability to test. We didn't know how widespread the virus was through the community. And so this is weighed very heavily. Those kind of considerations are weighed very heavily on us through all of this. And as I said there, you know, that is still the principal consideration. We want to avoid our people dying of this disease. The two unfortunate deaths, both of those individuals contracted the virus elsewhere, even though they died here. So we have an incredible record, and one which we want to preserve, not for having the record, but because it's lives of our people that we're talking about.
Well, I hear you, and in the beginning, we'll call it, a lot of my peers talk about, you know, this thing isn't any worse than the flu, and they start talking about percentages. And I can absolutely feel your sense of responsibility when you're having to worry about people's lives. As I told my peers when they gave me that sort of, you know, conversation about just percentages, I said, listen, my child had childhood cancer. Her chances of getting that were very small. So a percentage is just as a percentage until it affects you. Then all of a sudden it's not a percentage anymore. Then you have to deal with it. So I say that to say that when we have these conversations about striking the right balance, that's from my heart. And I know the importance of it because people's lives are irreplaceable. So I'll use the word however very lightly because there isn't any however when we're talking about lives. But we do have to get past this and we do have to open up at some point. And now with the added complications of the EU and the UK fighting and vaccines so difficult, how can we sort of look at triggers that, or transparency, or you mentioned plans in your speech. How do we plan for a plan B? Because we must start thinking about one if the vaccines stop coming. What happens? How do we move forward?
I think the greatest challenge, what I said earlier, is persuading enough of the right demographic or people to get vaccinated. That is absolutely key to reopening. I really don't think that the issue with availability of the vaccines is one that is going to be long-term. There are just too many companies producing the vaccines, too many of them on the cusp of having their vaccine approved. And so the current pressures on numbers available are going to go away, just as it was with the test kits. I would say, within another month, pressure is likely to ease. The greater challenge, which all of us are seeing, is being able to persuade our people to take the vaccine. But without that, there is, quite frankly, no way to reopen safely. As all around the world is constantly demonstrating to us, because you lock down and you suppress the virus spread through the community for a number of weeks, in some cases a number of months, and then it flares again, and then you go back into lockdown.
And I think go ahead.
So that's daunting. As I say, the vaccine is no panacea, so it's interesting times.
Yeah. And I think maybe changing tacks a little bit throughout this, obviously without a tourism industry and obviously the knock-on impact that has had to all of our hospitality industry, our financial services industry has continued and performed well through the last that period, and that has obviously helped to keep some of the economy flowing, and everyone's been doing their part. Obviously, as you mentioned in your presentation, the EU and its political-driven leaders are threatening, new tax haven blacklists, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, we need to make sure that our financial services industry is protected, and we've been taking a lot of steps forward in doing that and to adhere. But do you feel maybe that the steps we've taken are enough, and how far do we need to go? Do we need other things that need to be strengthened, do you feel? Or do you feel we've taken the necessary steps to get us where we can say enough is enough type scenario?
You're speaking about legislation now?
Legislation and overall and regulation that have had to be put in place recently. Yeah,
the noises they're making now, there's some confusion, even some confusion in the media. One media report I saw on this, the vote that was taken, and I'm sure it was yesterday or the day before, in the European Parliament, which was about the creation of an automatic blacklist of all countries that have zero direct taxation. That, obviously that is worrying, because that is a sense of how the elected members of the European Parliament are thinking. But the resolution itself is, I think the closest I can put it, analogy I can think of, is that's like akin to what we call a private member's motion here. It doesn't have binding effect. It'll be a matter for the Commission, obviously, whether they take that particular initiative forward. But it is not the first time any of us who've been around this have heard that proposition. I mean, the hawks in Europe are absolutely gung-ho to do away with any country that does not have a certain minimum level of direct taxation. Now, there's no legislation we can pass to fix that. There's no regulation we can pass except we impose direct taxation. So that is a very difficult but requires a continued diplomatic and technical and academic battle with them over this issue, because what you're having to try to change is perceptions and views. Cabinet has decided a few weeks ago, although we've been talking about this for some time, COVID interrupted a lot of this, but we are going to establish an office a Cayman Islands government office in Brussels with direct representation there, as well as Hong Kong and Washington, with an ambitious target for being the end of this year. Obviously, there's an election intervening, and we'll have to see what the government looks like after that. But that is certainly our view about what Cayman continues to need to do, especially with the UK no longer a member of the EU. We need a permanent, effective presence in Brussels that can help to advise the government about what we need to be doing on that particular front. And it'll be interesting to see what the Biden administration thinks and says about places like the Cayman Islands. In times past, the Democrats weren't terribly friendly to jurisdictions like ours, but after the last administration that the US has had, I think most people are breathing a sigh of relief, at least at the early utterances and posture of the Biden administration.
Will, do you have maybe a question or two from the audience?
Yes, absolutely. Got a couple here. Well, the first one we'll deal with in the construction industry. It reads, we can all agree that the construction industry has been pivotal in sustaining the Cayman Islands economy during the pandemic. The construction sector would like to know when the Builders Board will resume licensing of contractors. In addition, can you comment on when the legislation submitted in 2018 to register architects and engineers will be enacted?
Well, I'm going to have to confess ignorance to the position with respect to those two matters. None of those have come across my radar in recent times, so I'm not going to make up an answer. I just don't know.
Okay, we'll move on to another question. This is dealing with Caymanian employment. As an employer, we're having difficulty finding adequately trained Caymanian employees in our field, and yet it is 100% essential to our vision and mission to do so. What are the plans to facilitate more rigorous educational opportunities on island, not abroad, to produce high-quality, homegrown talent with bachelor degree level skills?
I actually think that the University College is doing a very good job, generally speaking. I'm not sure why we think that they need to be produced locally. I think we just need to press and push for getting Caymanians who have the requisite education, training, and skills to carry out the various jobs that we have here, regardless of where they get that education. Government spends about $15 million a year on scholarships, not counting the private sector scholarships. So I don't think people need to feel limited to just going to the University College or one of the other local tertiary institutions, although I think they're all doing a good job.
Your comments about the vaccine has triggered another question, and basically they're saying it seems like we're now doubtful or hopeless about the reopening timeline due to the variants in the virus. So do you actually have a timeline that you're working from with regard to the goal of reopening?
Not currently. The goal that we had was always contingent upon getting enough people vaccinated. And that I think is what we all need to start thinking about. no country in the world has been able to safely resume normal business and social activity. No country. And therefore, the vaccine offers, or one of the vaccines offers the only real hope. So, because even, although there remain lots of questions about the efficacy of the vaccine in the sense of the jury is still out as to whether or not, if you've been vaccinated, whether you can still contract it, the virus, and transmit it to someone else, even if you don't get sick. So this is the reason for the great push to get as many people vaccinated as possible, because one thing that has been proven is if you have the vaccine, you don't get very ill at all. What they can't be sure of is because it's a coronavirus, like the flu, the regular flu. If you get the flu vaccine, you can still contract the flu and pass the flu to someone else, even though you don't get very sick from it. So because all of this is so new and because it is constantly evolving, it is very difficult for anybody, and I'm the furthest thing from a scientist you could look for to answer these questions. But what we do know is if we get enough of the vulnerable people in our community vaccinated, that gives us the possibility of opening safely, in the sense that very few people in our community would get really sick or possibly die as a result. So everything really hinges on getting that vulnerable demographic vaccinated. And by the way, I got my second dose today. So we'll see how much. The first one caused me pain in the arm for about 2 days, but nothing else. We'll see where we get to. I mean, I've grown a 6th toe, but I don't think that had anything to do with the virus.
And just a last one from the audience. We're getting near 5:30, so I think we have a reception afterward. So this one's a bit of a politically, emotionally charged question, I guess, but in view of the instability in the U.S. and the high level of confidence in Cayman's economy and governance, how can the government leverage this? And then they say here as an addition, for example, how does the odd situation with the Speaker, Mr. Bush, and the Standards in Public Life law affect local and international investor confidence?
Right. I was wondering when the Speaker Bush question would come in. I saw Johan over there. So just let me say this. The situation or the incident, whatever we want to call it, with Speaker Bush, which resulted in him being charged before the court and convicted and sentenced and all of those things, is very, very regrettable. There is nobody in my government that would say otherwise than that. One of the great challenges of leadership is the exercise of judgment. Our parliament is made up of 19 elected members and 2 official members. This is not the UK Parliament with 650 members where you have lots of choice. We currently have 12 members on the government side. I was and remain absolutely certain that an effort on our part to remove Mr. Bush would have, and probably even now, would trigger a collapse of the government. When this incident occurred in March, I believe it was, or February, I've forgotten, either late February or early March, I was in London. I just landed when I got the news. I can't remember the precise date, late February, early March of last year. We were about to go into, well, we went into lockdown on the 22nd. The government was already grappling with how we were going to manage this COVID-19 crisis unprecedented. None of us knew. We had no testing ability. This was a really stressful period. And if we had been in different times, although the decision wouldn't be entirely mine, I certainly would have taken a different view about how we went about that. But to throw the government, to throw the country into early elections at the start of the COVID-19 crisis, I promise you, I don't care who they put there, they were going to have to start from scratch because they wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have had the background and knowledge that the current government did. It takes a while to get your feet on the table, no matter how bright you are. And I had to make a call. And I said, I can't do this to the country at this stage. So that's really where we are. I know, and if I were in the opposition, perhaps I would take the view that opposition with a small o, that many of the others have. But ultimately, our responsibility, which all of us, and I know I do, take very seriously, is what is in the overall best interest and welfare of the people that we have sworn to protect. And you have to make these calls. I mean, the government has taken much heat, and I'm sure we'll take some more. There is now a motion, I'm told, which has been filed by the Leader of the Opposition and the former Leader of the Opposition, which is, quite frankly, just a publicity stunt at this stage. But the House has, tomorrow will be exactly 8 weeks before this House is dissolved. You know, ultimately, the electorate is going to have an opportunity to make its views felt on this and other issues about the government's performance and on Mr. Bush. And so that's where I've had to lead it. If we were dealing with ideal circumstances, and I mean, actually I would love an early election, I would love one in March rather than have to wait till May, but that would throw off a whole lot of things which we are trying to get done in relation to managing this crisis. And it would throw things into turmoil. It would force the election office to have to go into overdrive. So I've talked. Believe you me, I've talked to the governor about this, the possibility of early elections, at least 5 times, you know, since this incident has happened. And each time I come away from the discussions very sober about whether that is in the best interest of the country or not. I mean, I think my government would be better off if we had early elections at this stage, because not many people are prepared, are as prepared as we are. But I can't allow that kind of consideration to override what's in the overall best interest of my country and my people. So I'll just have to continue to take the licks for it until the elections, and then we'll see whether Mr. Bush is returned or not.
Easy to be a critic when it doesn't fall in your lap, but I'd say no good time to make a bad decision. Anyway, my last comment, unless Mike has one, is I said it in my incoming speech and I alluded to it in my outgoing speech. Sustainable Cayman is very important to me personally. I personally don't believe that Cayman can handle the same growth that we have had over the last 40 years continuing into the next however long, and it doesn't appear as if Cayman has a sustainable growth plan. What are your views? Is it just business as usual and let it grow as fast as it's seeming to grow, or should we have some type of a model that has a sustainable growth?
What I really wish I had the answer to that, because I've been around this long enough to I remember writing letters when I was a youngster. I mean, I don't mean a kid. When you're almost 60, a youngster means you're in your 20s. So about that, when Cayman's population was 16,000 people. But the difficulty with the economic model that we have, and as a businessman, business people like you all understand that probably even better than I do, is that there are no convenient taps that you can turn on and turn off at will, because Cayman relies on inward investment for just about everything. And the world's economy moves in cycles. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. When it's down, our unemployment rates go through the roof. People are screaming at government to do something to stimulate the economy, as it was in 2013 when we took office. And then you go through these spikes, and then it'll fall off again. So I think the question for us is not, I think Cayman continues to need further development. I think we just need to become more choosy about the kind of development that we want and where we want it.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. There's a plan to how it works, as opposed to just a free-for-all. Whoever comes with a lot of money, they can spend it however they want, wherever they want, and that's the concern I have. But not to get too far into it today. Mike, do you have anything else?
No, I think we can I think the plan is to call it a day at that point, Will?
Yeah, the hors d'oeuvres are waiting.
Well, I have one more thing for those of you who don't get the vaccine, it comes in tonight. There is Waitrose coming in, so you should be okay.